set? All right. At this time, I'll call to order the May 20th, 2024 Planning Commission. And move on to roll call.
Commissioner Bott,
Present.
Commissioner Britton,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Chair Frazier is out tonight, Commissioner Knable,
Here.
Commissioner Rasmussen here, Commissioner Stevens is out tonight as well.
All right, thank you. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Knable. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a second from Commissioner Rasmussen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Nay? Oh, no nays. All right, see, I'm just getting back into it since I don't normally do this. All right, now, item number 4, open forum. Tonight, the open forum is a time during the meeting when citizens can talk about something that is not on tonight's agenda. So if you'd like to speak on something that is not on the agenda, I will open the open forum. And if somebody would like to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda, they can approach the podium and we can discuss it. Seeing none, I will close the open forum and move on to item number 5, the chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a volunteer advisory group to the City Council. One of the commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of these public hearings is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak must step up to the podium, give their name and address before addressing the commission. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. The first step in the hearing will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have the opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comments. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to public comments. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. 2 complete agenda packets are available for viewing on the back table. Please do not remove those items. The City Council will act on these items at their meeting on Wednesday, June 5th, 2024, which starts at 7 p.m. All right, moving on to item number 6, 6.1, Community Solar Garden Case IUP 2024-007, and Planner Jakes will be presenting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Great to be with you. The application before this evening is an interim use permit for a proposed 5-megawatt community solar garden. The subject site is located in the eastern agricultural area of the city, adjacent to 100th Street South, as well as Lehigh Road South, and then about 3/4 miles east of Kimbrough Avenue South. A little background on the site. The subject site has been utilized for agricultural purposes as far back as city files indicate. The site currently consists of 2 parcels. The west parcel is approximately 80 acres and the eastern one 75, for a total subject site of 155 acres. A condition of approval will require that the 2 lots be combined, and that is in order that the 300-foot setback required by ordinance is met, as if solar panels were proposed on one parcel, it wouldn't meet that 300-foot setback. So condition of approval will require those 2 lots be combined. Given this is a unique proposal, not before the Commission very often, I thought it'd be beneficial to walk through ordinance regulations and just talk through the history of the city code related to community solar gardens. So the original ordinance regulating solar energy systems was adopted in 2015 by the City Council and then revised in 2017 with a few updates. So the major updates between the 2 ordinances were the setback, and then vegetative management plan and maintenance of weed growth and pollinator mixes. And so the setback in the prior ordinance in 2015 was the principal structure setback. So in the agricultural districts, it'd be 25 feet from the property line, and that's how close the panels could have been. Today's code requires a 300-foot setback from the property line to the solar panels, and in 2015, the other change was that there wasn't really a requirement for vegetative management plans and how weed growth, et cetera, was being maintained. Modern day code requires a vegetative management plan and that weed control be mitigated accordingly to their plan. So the city code, Title 11.4.13, requires the following for a community solar garden. The one that I'll touch on specifically is the second bullet point, which states the site is located within the designated areas of Exhibit A. So that map is on screen before you. So a proposal for a community solar garden would have to be within the red area that's shown on screen. Again, these are agricultural parcels that we don't expect utilities to be at within the near future, thus allowing for an interim use permit for a community solar garden, as utilities wouldn't reach the parcels within the near future. The site is zoned Ag 1 agricultural and guided as agricultural in the 2040 comprehensive plan. The use is permitted with an interim use permit. The application before this evening is proposed for a length of 25 years, which is in accordance with our previously approved community solar gardens. The one thing I'll note is that there is a condition that allows an extension of up to 10 years if approved by the City Council. And then within that 10-year extension, if the City Council were to grant that extension, there is a clause within that condition that if a development application is received on an adjacent parcel, that solar use is required to cease and then be removed within 1 year's time to not prohibit or inhibit orderly development throughout the city. And again, that's just within that 10-year extension. So the application's for 25 years and a potential extension for up to 10 years. Before I jump into the site plan, I just wanted to make note that the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting on May 14th. There were 4 residents in attendance. And as we talk through the site plan, I'll incorporate the concerns and comments from the neighborhood meeting and the residents and how the applicants address those concerns. So the applicant is proposing a 35-acre array area. The array area is where the solar panels are held and equipment pads. So that's on that western side of the site. The applicant is meeting that 300-foot setback after the parcels are combined. Access is proposed off Lehigh Road South, running along that southern boundary. And that access is proposed to be Class 5. I will note at the neighborhood meeting, residents expressed concern over the proposed utility pole location. The applicant originally proposed those on the south side of that access drive, and the residents noted concerns related to maintenance and just proximity to the property line. And so as a result, the applicant moved those utility poles to the northern side of the site access to mitigate those concerns. Another concern that was brought up was burying those wires and making those underground instead of having utility poles. So a condition of approval does require that those lines be undergrounded and buried unless there's written evidence and a finding of support from Xcel Energy requiring they be above ground. And the rows of panels are proposed to run north and south and pivot on a single axis to follow the sun. That's a horizontal axis. And then the maximum height of the panels is proposed at 10 feet at full tilt. So a lower profile design than what we see in our other community solar gardens throughout the city where they're not moving. So these are lower profile and then able to pivot to follow the sun. And then I'll just note that there's no noise created from that pivoting motion. We actually have a community solar garden in the city that has this pivoting, and we haven't received any noise complaints or concerns from adjacent residents. The applicant's proposing 5 equipment pads that are 200 square feet in size for each pad. All the pads are located within that secured array area, highlighted in red on screen before you. That array area is proposed to be enclosed with a 6-foot tall chain link fence. At the neighborhood meeting, residents expressed concerns over the color of the fence. The applicant originally proposed a standard 6-foot chain link fence. However, the residents requested that either be black or green coated in order to blend into the environment and really keep that country feel. So the applicant has agreed to provide a black coated chain link fence to really blend in. And again, that fencing is just proposed around the 35-acre array area, not the 155-acre site. Moving into transportation, again, access is proposed off of Lehigh Road and proposed to be Class 5. One of the concerns residents brought up was related to the current road condition of Lehigh Road South and 100th Street South, which are adjacent to the subject site. A condition of approval will require that the applicant enter into a memorandum of understanding that will outline the designated traffic route, as one has not been currently decided. So whether traffic flows from Kimbrough to 100th or up Lehigh Road, that would be decided in that memorandum of understanding that the applicant enters into the city with. And the other thing I'll note is that that MOU would also discuss in detail pre-construction road condition as provided by the applicant, require that testing to be done, and then the condition of the road post-construction, and then would require that the applicant restore the road to its existing condition or pre-construction condition. So being sure that we're not leaving the road in worse condition than when we began with the application. The majority of traffic will be construction traffic. Following construction, access to the site is minimal. An engineer will access the site 2 times per year in order to just do general maintenance, ensure the panels are working properly. And then maintenance crew will access the site once per month to ensure that weed growth is mitigated and the vegetative management plan is being followed accordingly. And so city code does require the vegetative management plan, or VMP. The applicant has provided that in a detailed plan at that. The plan details the restoration, vegetative restoration plan for that array area. So the applicant is proposing a native pollinator-friendly seed mix that meets state requirements under those solar panels, and has provided a detailed maintenance plan. And that maintenance plan does talk about the crews going in once per month, and we'd require that with a condition as well, just to ensure there's no weeds traveling to adjacent properties and weed growth is being maintained accordingly. The applicant is also proposing a row of Black Hill spruce trees along the southern boundary of the array area, which is highlighted in red on screen before you. City code also requires a decommissioning plan be provided, and the applicant has submitted a detailed decommissioning plan. The decommissioning plan details the removal of the site and restoration to its pre-application conditions. So really to restore that land to pre-construction conditions. The process of decommissioning is on screen before you. The only other item I wanted to touch on related to decommissioning is that city code allows the city to obtain a cash escrow or letter of credit that the city would hold for the length of the project. And then once the IUP expires, if the applicant or owner at the time does not remove and restore that land to its pre-existing condition, then the city would be able to do that with the funds that were set aside. Again, just to round things out, the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting on May 14th with 4 residents in attendance. The main concerns are listed on screen, and we'll just talk through how those have been mitigated. Just to reiterate, construction traffic's impact to adjacent roadways will be dealt with the memorandum of understanding, which will detail the pre-construction and post-construction condition of the road and that repair. The proposed utility pole locations have been moved to the north side of the road, and then that condition added requiring them to be undergrounded unless XL Energy gives the city a written verification that those have to be above ground. Concern on the management of weed growth has been mitigated through that VMP, that maintenance plan, and the condition that's requiring maintenance crews once per month. And then the concern that I didn't touch on yet was water runoff to adjacent properties. I'll invite up our Assistant City Engineer, Crystal Raleigh, to just run through stormwater management and how the site is providing for that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Acknowledging that there's a concern here for stormwater management and the rate and volume of stormwater leaving the site after development, I wanted to highlight the proposal that the applicant has put together for stormwater management on this site. The applicant's proposal is to meet City of Cottage Grove standards as well as Minnesota Pollution Control Agency requirements. And they're doing that through a variety of ways. And I'll kind of list how the different ways that the applicant is proposing to meet these standards. One of the things they're proposing is an infiltration basin. As you know, today the site sits as an agricultural field. When water falls onto it, some will run off, but most will soak into the ground. When we're adding things like gravel roads and those concrete pads and the solar panels, the water is likely to run off more quickly with a greater volume. So because of that, the applicant is proposing to construct an infiltration basin sized for that volume, so that volume of water can soak back into the ground. Again, Connor touched on this, but vegetation is another important part of their stormwater management plan. A typical farm field has some plants, but a lot of bare soil out on the field. The applicant's plan proposes native seeding vegetation throughout the site. Native seeds and pollinators have really deep root systems that can carry that water down into the ground better than crops do. So that's another way to manage stormwater on a site like this, and it's consistent with the city and Pollution Control Agency standards. There is an existing water course, Seeger Creek, that runs through the site. Vegetative buffers will be required on either side of that creek. So the applicant will be required to set back the panels 50 feet from both sides of the creek. And the infiltration basin that'll be proposed won't be able to be in line with that creek. So it'll have to be off to the side so that the water doesn't just blow through it. The applicant's also proposing erosion control measures during construction. A silt fence will surround the site during the construction to eliminate erosion from running off of that farm field. And then rock construction entrances will be required where vehicles will be leaving the site. So any dirt that's caked onto the tires will drive over these bigger rocks and it will fall off of the tires to eliminate tracking onto adjacent roadways. So yeah, acknowledging that there's a concern when we're adding solar panels to a field like this, these requirements that are in place by the city and the Pollution Control Agency are there to ensure that we're not discharging water faster than it is today and with more volume than it is today. So with that, the recommendation is on the screen before you. I'm happy to take any questions. I know the applicant is here as well, and Connor, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, does the applicant, would they like to add anything?
Good evening, my name's Evan Carlson. I am the applicant. I own Enterprise Energy. I started the company about 2 years ago. On my own, we've got about 6 people working for us now, but we're all local people. We're all from here. We're not going anywhere when the project is done, and we're all solar industry veterans. I've been in the business for about 8 years.
Could you state your address, please?
Oh, yeah, Enterprise Energy, 2925 Dean Parkway, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thank you.
That's our corporate office, so, that's where we are, and we do deals out of state, but this is our home state. I am a Minnesota attorney. I came up in the solar industry in this state. I have done hundreds of community solar gardens in Minnesota for my former employer, and then 2 years ago, I left and I started this company, and I started working on my own project using my own money, and this is one of the best deals that I've got. Not long after starting my own company, Minnesota law changed and increased the system size of community solar gardens from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts, which is what made this deal possible. I've been wanting to do a deal here since almost 10 years, and I've been in contact with this landowner for a very long time about wanting to do a deal here, but it never made sense because of the setbacks, the 300-foot setback, to put a 1 megawatt deal in the middle of a field. But when you start talking big numbers, 5 megawatts, you get better economies of scale. Not only does it make sense to use a full 40 for that use, but you can afford longer lines to interconnect. It takes a longer line to get to that road, meaning you can hide the thing better. You can get it out into a more rural area. So that's why we like the site. Also, it has just good characteristics for lack of visibility. There's a nice hill on one side of it, really big setbacks in any direction of continued agricultural use. To the east is common ownership. To the north, we were able to give about a 800-foot setback. I mean, it's 300 feet to the under normal circumstances, but there's another 400 or so feet on top of that. And the west is agricultural. There are neighbors in the area, and we're aware of that. That's why we propose screening on the south end. I suppose it's been a while since you've had one of these. Should I just kind of describe community solar generally? Would that be helpful? Just kind of the economics of it and what. So you see 2 types of solar deals getting installed. Well, 3. Let's call it 3. You got rooftop deals, pretty self-explanatory. Then you've got utility scale deals, and they are big projects that are in much more rural areas that sell power directly to Xcel, and they interconnect into the transmission level of the electric grid. So the high lines, they get out far away, they go really big, they go into the high lines, and they sell power at the rate that the utility buys power for. Community solar, it really has a direct benefit to actual people. It is a program for people who don't have a good spot for solar panels. And we aggregate those people and we put them all on a single site. So when we put power into the grid, we generate a bill credit, which is a right to remove that amount of power from the grid somewhere else in the grid. We sell that bill credit to the subscriber. who then offsets their power bill using that bill credit. But the economics of doing that are better because we're selling bill credits at or near the price that a consumer would pay for electricity. So it's a little more profitable than the big ones, but they can be smaller. So this is a highly regulated program. It's not just like selling power. You have to be within the community solar program, which has certain rules about how it operates. One of those is that you need to be in Xcel Energy's territory. You need to be on a line that has the capability of handling the electric load. And under this new 5 megawatt program, after you receive your interconnection agreement, you apply to the Department of Commerce for approval, and it's on a first come, first served basis. Reason that's really important is some communities have a lot of 1 megawatt projects that are currently in study with Xcel. And Xcel studies them sequentially, one at a time. But here, it never made sense to do a 1 megawatt deal, or it hasn't made sense for a very long time to do a 1 megawatt deal. So there's nothing in queue on this line, except for our deal. So if we are in study with the utility, we're likely to come out of study very soon, and makes it far more likely to actually get built. So it's a really awesome deal from that standpoint. It's one of our best deals, and I'm going to hope if this gets approved, I'll be very proud of it. Other things that why the parcel is, it's not an accident why it's a good looking parcel for a solar array. It's because the city did its, there was a comprehensive ordinance amendment. It had to be in this very narrow area. Resolution 985 that identifies those areas that don't have utilities and infrastructure. It's got to be a big parcel that can meet that 300-foot setback, and it can't be an ag preserve. Most of those are enrolled in ag preserve. So finding that is a real needle in a haystack. And here, this one, it came out of ag preserve more recently, so opened up the ability to do it. Staff talked about the VMP and decommissioning. We contracted with Natural Resource Services to prepare a VMP. That's a new thing under the new ordinance. It's got a lot of traction in the solar industry, and it's common. But what is a little bit unique about our VMP and our proposal is that we actually cite Minnesota statute that says what you need to do to hold yourself out to be a pollinator-friendly seed mix. You can put together a plan. A plan is just a plan. But here, we're actually saying there are guidelines to follow to say, what are you actually planting? And does it meet the state standard? There's actually guidelines for how do you maintain it, and how do you know that it's actually working and not turning it into weeds. And we have stipulated all of that right off the bat. So you can inspect it. It takes a while to get it established and do it really well. But the contractor we have is really good at this. They're very experienced, and we've just come right out and said, hey, we intend to satisfy the statute. So there's something there that actually has some teeth. Decommissioning plan, the whole thing is planned for removal, which is a nice planning tool for cities because it's a temporary use. So there are concrete equipment pads at the points of interconnection. There is that's about it for concrete, though. It's driven I-beams. So that all can be yanked out of the ground. Also, we're using a tracker system. You've seen that before on one of your deals, but that's more newer. They used to be fixed more often, but we've seen the trackers actually perform really well here. There was a little concern early on that maybe they wouldn't be up to the winter, but they've shown to be pretty durable. So that's why we're doing that. And then on the poles, so we talked about a couple different options at the neighborhood meeting. The poles are where we interconnect with Xcel's equipment. That's where it stops being our stuff and starts being their stuff. And there are two ways we can do this. There's a set of poles here. It's 4 poles per megawatt. And some of those are Xcel's poles, and some of those are our poles, and that's where it connects, and we're handing off our power to them. If we take all our stuff and we move it all to the road, then we control what happens between us and the road, and we can bury that line. We know we can do that, and we're okay with that. if we have Excel's poles come to us, we're getting the poles away from the road, but now there may be poles along the road coming to us because those are no longer our poles. They're Excel's poles. We can ask them to bury it. They probably will. But we can't order them to do it. So that's why that condition came out the way it did. They have to be buried unless Excel tells me, you know, I gotta give you some writing or something that says they won't do it, which is fine. We're perfectly okay with that. And then, you know, I own the company, and if there's anything I can do to improve the project, if there's more feedback you have, I can make promises on the fly, and I don't have to ask permission, so I'm happy to improve it any way that we can, so.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Rasmussen?
Could you tell me a little more about the tracker panels? How do they work? Are they electric motor driven?
Yeah, there's a motor on each, they call it a string, right? Each row, there's one motor at the end. So the fixed panels are organized into rows that go from east to west, and they face the south and they don't move, right? Because the sun is generally southern exposure. The trackers, on the other hand, are in rows that go from north to south, and they pivot on a single axis following the sun from east to west. So they need to be, you need a flat surface to do that because you need a straight tracker. The trackers come in certain fixed lengths, so you can't do, there's some orientations that you can't work. It's hard to work on kind of irregular fields with a tracker because you can't do short ones because they each need a motor and that gets to be expensive. But this is a pretty flat site, so it actually works really well. They're a little smaller, a little lower profile generally. They just, normally the fixed ones are two panels end on end, and these are more like one. It kind of depends on how it gets done, but they're usually smaller. And because they flatten out throughout the day, they're a little lower profile. They aren't as visible. But they do need maintenance. I mean, things happen. They sometimes need a motor replaced or something like that. But it can be done.
They're pretty reliable in general, though. We're not going to have solar panels facing every which direction.
Yes.
After a few years.
Right, and they do have warranties. They have factory warranties, and we have a strong interest in keeping that equipment working because those poles, that's us measuring our power and Excel measuring our power, and we're always making sure it matches up. So if there's something that's not, you know, if one of those isn't working right and we can get more power out of it, there's a strong incentive to fix it and get it working again. And there's a warranty in place.
Sense. Commissioner Bott?
Yeah. You mentioned screening on the south side of the installation. Why only on that side?
Well, we thought it had the most potential for visibility from the road to the south. You could see it in that way. To the east, there's no way of seeing it over that hill. The homes that were most, there's a neighborhood kind of in the southeast direction. Frankly, all of the homes have very good setbacks. They're all very well set back from it in all directions. And to be honest with you, in most circumstances, with those setbacks, it wouldn't get proposed at all, even with that hill there. But there is a neighborhood to the southeast, and we wanted to do something for them. So that's why we did it.
And my follow-up question to that is, since you have sun mostly on the south side, would that screening affect your sunlight on the panels?
No, we designed that into it. So the setback is big enough so that they will not cast a shadow on the project.
You mentioned in the fire prevention section that you will be monitoring the power generation continuously.
Yes.
Is that remote or
Yes.
on-site?
Yes. Satellite monitoring system, 24 hours a day.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to know is, you mentioned community solar from going from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatt, and then the fact that this is 5 megawatt installation that's economically more viable. So how does that scale? Does that mean that 1 megawatt installations are smaller in size, or? It's
Yes. Well, yes, it does. I mean, it's 5 times bigger. In fact, this one is 5 1 megawatt projects that are located adjacent to one another in one area. So back in 2016 and before, there was a 5 megawatt cap on co-located 1 megawatt community solar gardens. So you saw projects that look like this. You saw 5 1 megawatt projects right next to each other, one fence around them, one kind of general area where they all interconnect. And this will look like those ones. However, we submitted this a while ago as 1 megawatt deals because that's the only way we could. That was the only way that we were allowed to do it. But now you're gonna start seeing 5 megawatt deals, which are actually one larger 5 megawatt deal without 1 megawatt deals. But practically speaking, it's just semantics. They're just, the electricity is the same, the footprint's the same, the equipment's the same. But the economics of it are way better. I mean, mobilizing is better, you get better pricing on equipment. It's like, you only have to build it once. When you build these things, it kind of happens in stages. So you get your field work, your environmental work. We've done all that. You do your permitting, and then when we break ground on it, first thing they go out and they do the pole driving. And there's a group one contractor that does that. And then there are deliveries. They do the racking system. That takes a while. Once the poles are like halfway through, they start putting on the racks. And then once that's about halfway through, they put it on the panels, and then they wire it all up. But the point is, those are separate crews, and the contractor mobilizing somebody out to do those deliveries and do it once, the economies of scale on it are pretty huge. They're pretty significant to do a 5 as opposed to a 1. So it's quite a bit more profitable. And it's a nice site. I mean, it's got a flat area, so we're able to get a tracker. There's no shading on it. It's just a real beauty, you know.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
I did, but you can
all right, Commissioner Knable.
I was just curious about how your 2 or your 5 electrical panels are connected. Do they all run to one system and then that goes into the line to get out, or how are they all connected?
Well, we run under this current site plan. The Xcel brings their line out to us, whether it be above ground or buried, and then they each have a separate point of interconnection on that line, which Xcel brought to us.
So there's 5 different lines coming out of.
But only in a very short area. It's just, they all come out of the same part of the fence, and then they all interconnect into Xcel's line right there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Okay, my turn. Okay, so I appreciate all the information that you're giving. I think solar is just, it's kind of fascinating to me. But, so I want to know about the chain link fencing and kind of the security of the site itself. Do you have people have people bugged these big solar gardens? You know what I mean? Like, do people mess with the property? I mean, how do you keep track of, trespassers and the unsavory?
Yeah, so I've heard of things in other states, like I've heard of things outside of St. Louis in Illinois. Sometimes they have things like that, but I've never heard of there being an issue within Minnesota.
Sure.
And this one is so well hidden that I mean, you'd have to be looking for it to be getting there. I have heard of deer. I mean, you wouldn't think a deer could jump at the 6-foot fence, but it can happen. So sometimes you got to go in there and let deer out. I've heard of that happening.
Sure.
But the fence is selected by electrical code. That's why it's a chain link fence.
Sure.
So, but it is in essence the fence that we propose. Sometimes you see barbed wire on the top of it. I don't believe we didn't do that. So it's not necessary, but,
I was just more curious to see if, I don't know.
yeah, it hasn't come up. Sometimes, they let sheep in there to graze. There's a lot of talk about what else could be done in there.
Right.
The area of farming in there, they call that agrovoltaics. And there's a lot of exciting stuff being done about what kind of crops you can get off there and how to really make it profitable. And there's kind of this debate, like, okay, is this a vanity project that is still keeping it in ag production, or is it actually productive? Or, does it even matter? But what if we just get hay off of it and the farmer's using the hay? They got to get it from somewhere. So it's a really interesting area of the industry, but also because it's at odds with the free pollinator mix, which is a really good thing for the environment. the pollinators need a place to go. That's what CRP mix is, and the government pays for that, and here we're giving it away for free. So I'm not sure why, I don't know. That's some interesting context for you there, so.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Bott?
So this is just out of curiosity. So do you know that you're going to have the required number of subscribers for this community solar effort?
The subscribers?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have the subscribers for this one already selected. There are companies that only do subscriber acquisition for this type of project. This area is unusually desirable for solar under the older programs, where, because the subscriber needs to be located in the county where the garden is located or in an adjacent county. And so you've got so many options for subscribers here. Under the new program, though, that's not a requirement. However, there are other potential incentives to being located here. I mean, you can maybe gain some tax credits by demonstrating that you have low or moderate income subscribers. Maybe having some sort of direct community benefit, like actually having local subscribers. There may be tax credit incentives under that, under the Inflation Reduction Act, but to be determined. But in this area, we're not going to have any problem. Well, really, under the new program, there shouldn't be any problems anybody getting subscribers. Demand is through the roof in the Twin Cities, and get rid of that contiguous county rule really frees up a lot of people to do this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Further discussion? All right, at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against this application? Please approach the podium and state your name and address for the public record.
I'm Gene Smallage. I reside at 10992 Point Douglas Drive in Cottage Grove. I own 205 acres of farmland immediately adjacent on the south side of this project. I have a few concerns. The last solar project, I believe, was the John Meyer Solar Garden, which is on the east side of my property. At that time, in order to hook up to the three-phase power of XL, they had to cross a half mile of my property. John Burbank, who was the head planner for the city at that time, informed me any new lines in Cottage Grove will be buried. There will be no new poles. End of discussion. So I have a quarter mile of buried lines on my farm. And I think if it was good enough for me then, it's good enough for this project also. And at our neighborhood meeting, we discussed that with Evan. He got on the phone, and at the end of his phone conversation, I thought he assured us it was going to be buried. Now tonight, what I hear him saying, it might be buried or it might be on poles. I guess poles on my property line are just another place for weeds to grow, because you never get clean mowing adjacent to poles or fences. That property is part of a drainage way that extends from Old Cottage Grove through that property, through my property, through Gerton's. It passes under massive culverts under Highway 61, goes through Pine Coulee to the Mississippi River. There's 2,000 acres of drainage way that goes through that property. The current use of farming, the operators there for the last 50 years that I've been there have done a clean job. So when the water comes through, I don't get somebody else's weed seed. But my concern has been for the vegetation on these solar farms. All of the ones I've seen in the past, whether they be in Cottage Grove in Washington County or in Dakota County, the vegetation is a joke. There appears to be no management of the vegetation. Most of the time, it's weeds. And when they tell me it's going to be a pollinator friendly mix, some people at the state of Minnesota consider dandelions pollinator friendly. I don't. I don't want weed seed that might be growing in this solar garden flowing onto my property and contaminating my fields. So I want some assurance that there's going to be reasonable plantings and they're going to be reasonably maintained on a regular basis. As far as this access road that goes out to Lehigh, is that correct? My understanding is there needs to be a 10-foot setback, is that correct, Connor? 25. From the property line? And that, of course, is too narrow to be farmed, so somebody needs to maintain it and mow it periodically, not once a year. Otherwise, that's a weed haven also. I'd like to tell you a little story about that water run that goes through there. The last year here, we didn't have much snow. There was no water at all. But when we have a normal snowfall, the water that comes from Old Cottage Grove through that property and through mine represents a small river in the spring for maybe 3 days to a week. And one time, within the 50 years that I've been on that property, we had a 2-inch rain during the summer in probably 15 minutes. That's a flood. The water was so intense, it took out all of my fences with crop residue flowing, and the water flowed over top of Highway 61. Most of you haven't probably been in the community long enough to have seen that, but that happened on one occasion with the water coming through this property. So I have a concern on the road setback, which has just been clarified, and a concern for the setback for the buried line that will be adjacent to my property also. And the biggest concern, of course, will be the plantings and the maintenance of it to eliminate weeds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against this application? All right, seeing none, I'll close the open forum. Oh,
I'll make it to the planning commission. The name is Mike Mingo. I'm at 10940 Manning Avenue South. You've heard all of this story here today, okay? And I've heard it before, okay? I happen to live 75 feet from the solar garden that Gene was talking about. Okay? So it's right there. He's talking about weeds. Yeah, it's an issue. At the time we talked, before this project went in, and we talked with you people and the city council, we were gonna have weed control and we were gonna have all the pollinator plants and everything in there, and it never happened. Okay? So, for you people today, what I'm looking at is the people and the property owner, okay, they got a vested interest in getting this solar panel put in, okay? And that's great. That's, you know, that's the way our country runs. You know, we have people that invest in stuff and make money at it. All right? My question is that's great for them. What does Cottage Grove get out of this solar field? Okay, we know where that is. Now, besides that, the other question is, do we need another solar field? Do we need it? Are we going to, and they're talking about the subscribers to the solar field. Okay, if they subscribe to it, are they going to wind up cutting off their power lines from XL? Are we going to wind up shutting down a power plant someplace because of this? That's not going to happen. Okay? Prairie Island is going to be there long after we're gone. Okay? You got a cogen plant out here at Chemelite. That's going to be there. So the question is, do we need another solar field in the city? And like I say, these people have a vested interest in this thing already. Now, everybody's saying this solar is going to happen. The thing is that I've been living with this solar field for over 5 years now. I can tell you that there have been weeks where they're covered with snow. Okay? The other thing is that when this solar field was going in next to my property, I wound up talking to some of the people that are in the solar business. These people are all in the Southwest United States. Okay? They're sitting in a desert. You talk to them, and then they look at you and ask you, where are you going to put this? And you tell them it's in Minnesota. And they just kind of shake their head and go, good luck. You know, so that's my thing, is that alternative energy, we're going to have it. We've got the wind turbines, they're going to be here. I mean, even though they're out in the ocean killing whales, it doesn't make any difference. They're going to be here. And we're going to have solar fields. All right? No matter what. Charlie Koch, he put in a solar field. I don't know if you people know about his solar field out there, but he's got a huge solar field out there. all I can think of is if Charlie's putting in this solar field out there, he's not doing it because he thinks it's a good idea. He's doing it because he's got a cash interest in it. And that's where we have an issue. If you take all the government money out of these solar fields, what do we have? We don't have people interested in putting solar fields in. That's just solar fields. And like I say, these gentlemen have worked on it, and they've got a plan, and it's a good plan. And like I say, I've heard plans before. But it's up to you people. The question before you is, do we need another solar field in Cottage Grove? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against this application?
My name is Ryan Finnegan. I'm the property owner. I live in Hampton, Minnesota. As far as
Could you state your address, please?
24410 Emory Avenue, Hampton, Minnesota.
Thank you.
He had mentioned that we have a vested interest. We do. I come from a farm background. I fed cattle this morning. Just so you know, we own all the contiguous acres around there. So we don't have a vested interest to have a bunch of weeds going into our crops that would hit it 5 feet from the facility. I don't believe weeds are gonna be a problem. If they are, I'm gonna be the first one to know about it, being that our tenant, the Pineys, they've farmed for generations closer to where we live, Hastings area. They're very well known. They would be the first call that I would get. They're also very good weed mitigators as well. They do a nice job farming it. If you farm next to them, I'm sure you can see they do a top-notch job. Living by it, I actually signed, I have 100 acres we have south of our property. I signed up to put one by my house. So if there's a devil's advocate, hey, not in your backyard, I can show you a contract where I do have one in my backyard. So I don't think these are the end of the world. I think they're a good mixture. They're highest and best use of the land that, you know, in some areas have different soil qualities. This one is suspect. The last time I was here was actually for when you did your comp plan. You know, we were talking about, could this ever be developable? Not really, because all I heard was water contamination with the soil through 3M. Would that help? I don't know. But I do think pollen mix versus that versus what could already be there, we don't know. So that's why without city sewer and water, I know you guys weren't looking to put wells there as far as existing. I have wanted to do something from the get-go. I took it out of ag preserve right away. I mean, that takes 8 years to get out, so this isn't, you know, just thought of this yesterday, so it's pretty committed. So just wanted to let you know where we're coming from as well, and, you know, I appreciate you considering this.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, I'll close the open forum, public forum. Questions, discussion from the commission? I'm gonna, before I ask staff,
I have a couple.
okay, Commissioner Fisher.
Okay, so I appreciate everybody speaking and giving us kind of a full perspective from all sides, so thank you for that. I'm just wondering, it sounds like maybe with the current solar garden, there's some non-compliance going on with some of the weed issues and things. What is the city's process for dealing with non-compliant applications? Because really, if they're gonna be moving in for 25 years, and if they start causing issues, there really should be a way that citizens can come to the city and there should be some checks and balances. So can you go through how that works here?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Fisher, great questions and good points from the residents as well. Just to touch on a newer program we're rolling out is annual review of interim use permits and ensuring compliance with those permits. And we are starting with community solar gardens. Hearing the residents' complaints at the neighborhood meeting was the first complaints we've received from planning department, city perspective. So we're working to address those. Again, I noted in the ordinance when those were approved, there wasn't a vegetative management plan that was provided with those. So it's somewhat difficult to work through that and go back and require that, the seed mix is followed, things like that. However, we do have our, 8-inch tall, nuisance weed ordinance that we would be enforcing, will be enforcing for this site. But generally, it's resident complaint comes in, and then we would go out, verify it, and then address it through letters with the property owner. However, with this, there's another layer in that we'll be doing annual reviews of our interim use permits to ensure compliance with all the city code ordinances, but then specifically the approvals for that as well. So this is a site that, the site adjacent to the residence is on our radar and something that we will be addressing very timely here in the summer. So.
Then I had one more, sorry. They talked about the buried lines too versus the poles. I guess I'm confused. So the poles were originally supposed to go south, but now they're going on the north side of the property. So it sounds like some of that concern has been at least considered, and from what he was saying, it's hard to get Excel to give us a 100% answer of what that looks like. It sounds like in the past it was assured. What was the difference then? I mean, maybe you can't speak to that because none of us were here then, but, that seems interesting to know what the difference was now versus then.
Yeah, Commissioner Fisher, great questions. Just to talk through the polls from the neighborhood meeting and just to provide this background to that discussion. Originally, the poles were proposed on the south side of that access road, and then there's a pole farm proposed right here. So that's where all those interconnections happen with XL, the applicant's poles, and then run to Lehigh Road south. At the neighborhood meeting, the applicant discussed with his engineer moving some of these poles from the pole farm directly adjacent to Lehigh Road. And from a city perspective, our desire is to have that pole farm interior to the site to preserve the view shed from Lehigh Road and to really negate any visual impacts of the poles. So from a city perspective, it was more, if there was going to be poles, I should say, that those be interior to the site, which is why the condition requires that those lines be buried unless there's evidence from XL Energy. And just to provide the background on, above ground, underground, when the previous solar gardens were installed, all of them were required to be undergrounded. At that time, XL Energy's requirements didn't, well, they weren't finalized, I should say, at the time. So then undergrounding was allowed. However, over the years, I believe it was 2016, 2017, those regulations and requirements were finalized by XL Energy, and a lot of the modern day standard practices to have above ground for ease of access. XL can get directly to their poles, to their wires. They can see the AC disconnect and various other factors of the solar farm. So that's why more recently we're seeing more above ground applications throughout the state. And so that's where that condition comes into play, is to require them to be buried underground. However, if XL requires them to be above ground, we would entertain that, but try to keep those poles interior to the site to kind of retain that view from Lehigh Road.
Thanks.
Hold on just a minute. Did you have any more feedback on the questions from the citizens?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll just touch on the other ones. So there was talk about the road setback and then the maintenance around the poles. So that was mitigated by moving those poles, if they are required to be in place, to the north side of the access road. The required setback of that access road to the southern property line is 25 feet. The applicant's proposing, I believe it's 27.5 feet at the closest point to that property line. So room to mow within there and maintain that without going onto the property owner's property to the south. As well. And then touching on planting and weeds. So our previously approved solar projects, the ordinance didn't require a vegetative management plan, which is in essence the reasons that we see a lot of complaints and concerns with the weeds that are on those properties and those projects. However, code now requires this vegetative management plan, and we further put a condition that maintenance crews are visiting the site once per month to maintain that. They would be required to maintain that that area between the access road and the southern property line to ensure that's mowed and maintained, and then any weed removal in there as well as the site. And I just wanted to note, the current property owner talked about it, but they are still proposing to farm around the solar area. So again, provides that kind of visual stays the same, but then also controls the weeds as well to the solar array area and not washing out onto adjacent properties. And then I believe that was most of the questions, unless there was other.
Okay. Commissioner Bott, did you still have a question?
Yeah, so this is for, again, my understanding. When you said poles being above the ground at the point of connection, it's only like a standalone structure without any cables hanging out of it, and then the interconnects are at that location? Or they're going to be power lines connected to those?
Just clear my screen here. Commissioner Bott, to answer your question, there would be lines running on those poles. So I believe the poles are estimated to be about 40 feet in height. 3 wires on the poles, very similar to what we see along like 90th Street, various streets within the city here. So in this area, the green box here would have about 15 to 20 poles standing with wires connecting them at those connection points. And then those wires and poles would run, if they are required to be above ground, would run the length of that access road out to Lehigh Road. And on Lehigh Road, there's existing above-ground poles that run along that road to the south, eventually down to Manning Avenue. So the applicant would have their interconnection from the solar site to XL's right interior to the site where that green box is, and then that line would run all the way to Lehigh Road and then eventually down to Manning Avenue. So new poles would be constructed interior of the site up to Lehigh Road.
So if the connections were, or interconnects were underground, then you don't need a pole there, or you still need a pole there just for the interconnect, and then the power lines would go underground? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so Commissioner Bott, if those lines are undergrounded, generally it's a cabinet that sits on an equipment pad, and then XL or whoever needs to access that would go to the cabinet, and then there would be no poles at all. So that would get rid of the poles all the way from Lehigh Road to the applicant's site, and then be a cabinet-style box, more or less.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Okay. Further discussion from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen.
Excuse me. I mean, from a planning perspective, it seems like it checks most of the boxes. It's in the right area, correct setbacks, screening, fencing. I do understand the citizens' concerns about some of the weeds, especially not within the area, but around the access roads and some of the other connection points. I see that on some of our other projects. It sounds like the city's going to help maintain that, enforce that, and do regular inspections, and there's additional things in place with plantings and whatnot that should help out there. I think I'd generally be in favor of it.
Additional discussion? And I'd also agree. Back when we started all this and they started putting solar farms in, nobody knew what it was going to look like. So I see growth within the rules that we have so that we can do things better. Not going to always get it right, but we can grow from it. So I agree that I think we're headed in the right direction, and at least we have some teeth in our ordinances now that can, not that the applicant wouldn't want to do it. Not all applicants are the same. But it gives us ability to maintain and monitor what's going on. All right, if there's no further discussion, I look for a motion.
A motion to approve, subject to conditions stipulated in the staff report.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Rasmussen,
I'll second.
second from Commissioner Fisher. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0, and that will be on the June 5th agenda for the City Council. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 7, approval of the April 22nd, 2024 Planning Commission minutes. If there are no changes, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Motion approved from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second from Commissioner Bott. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. The meeting minutes are approved. Move on to item number 8, recap of the May 1st and 15th, 2024 City Council meetings, and Director Schmidt. will be presented.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. All the way back to May 1st council meeting, a couple items on there that will sound familiar to you from our April meeting. So those zoning updates, after we had implemented for about a year, we had a handful of items that we kind of kept track of to kind of straighten some things away. And then, of course, our complete rewrite of the sign code, moving that from the zoning code into its own section. So that was approved by the council on that May 1st meeting. The Mississippi Landing First Edition Final Plat was also approved by the council on that date. For those of you who aren't aware, there is some grading activity going on down there, so things are well underway for that First Edition, 110 lots, hopefully to be online sometime this fall. And then the transportation facility, so that the bus garage, they're working on upgrading their fuel tank there, and kind of some other improvements to the site per se, the parking lot and things of that nature. So that was also approved by the council on the 1st. So we'll see that happening over the summer. And then just one item to mention from that May 15th meeting is that minor subdivision that was before you in April over on Kimbrough Avenue, creating two separate lots. One would be a new buildable lot, and then one the existing home would remain on. So with that, that's all the update I have. But of course, Councilmember Kambata, if he has anything to add, he certainly will.
Thank
Councilmember,
you.
do you have anything to add?
Mayor Bailey and Councilmember Justin Olson are currently, or rather maybe just coming back from Las Vegas. They were at the ICSC, which is the International Commercial Real Estate Symposium. And they are there marketing our city to potential businesses. We always have constituents that are asking, when are we going to get different dining options or different, amenities here in town. So they are currently trying to help raise the level of awareness about Cottage Grove. So who knows, there may be new and exciting applications coming before you guys in the next few months as a result of that. Additionally, I'm here for questions from you guys.
Any questions for council member? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 8.2, inquiries. Do we have any inquiries for staff? Okay, I have one. I can't let the day go by without it. So this weed ordinance on the old solar farms, I know that it was mentioned that, we've changed the ordinance so that we have some control over that. What can we do with the older farms to bring them into compliance? And if we can't explicitly do something, what can we ask them to do? Because there's a chance that they might just do it. Because I can't believe that it would be that hard to plant the right things in there if we don't have the right things planted.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so we'll have to look back at each of those approvals for each of the gardens at the time. And if they did propose, a native or pollinator mix, we can certainly use our resources to find someone who's proficient to evaluate, what should those established areas truly contain at this point. And to your point, Mr. Chair, reach out to each of those solar garden owners or even property owner, right, ultimately, and have those conversations and see what we can't do to perhaps implement or follow a maintenance plan now and moving forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, any, Commissioner Rasmussen?
On the same subject, I guess I just comment that I believe Mr. Smallage hit it right on the head. The solar field next to my house, within the fence and the boundaries, they do a great job maintaining it. It's the access road and the 20 feet on each side. It's literally terrible. And then we have a couple of screens, berms with trees to screen it, and there's maybe about an acre in between them, and that just completely gets neglected. Buckthorn up neck high. It was a problem. Thankfully, I've got some pretty good neighbors who have all kind of chipped in and helped, but I do understand his concerns there, so I'd appreciate it if we could keep keep our options open and keep looking into that. My other question, I know these solar farms are all private businesses and that, but do we have visibility on any of the like performance reports? And, we know what it's supposed to generate under great conditions, but do we have any reports, like, I think we've got 3 or 4 solar fields here in town now, like what they actually are generating year after year? I think it would just be kind of curious to see, how they're performing. And if they're performing well, it could be a good sales tool and something to brag about, or something to learn from.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rasmussen, we can look into that and see what kind of information we can gather.
That'd be awesome, thank you.
I know I got them backwards, inquiry versus requests. So I'm going to finish with the request first, and then I'll ask you about the inquiries. In regards to, this is just more of a comment. I know that the citizen mentioned that, they're not going to shut down a power plant because we're doing this. However, this doesn't generate any active pollution. And I think the intent, and I may be wrong here, but my impression is the intent is that we don't want to build more power plants. So even though we're not shutting power plants down in order to implement these solar fields, they're not going to implement them unless they're making some money, which is fine. They have to be able to sustain it. But also, they're not throwing another nuclear power plant up if we can generate this energy another way. So I do see benefits in that. So before I switch back over to inquiries, are there any requests? Commissioner Bob.
So the request that I have is the topic, one of the issues raised during the discussion today was not knowing whether Excel would go for undergrounded cabling or overground cabling, right? So does city have any jurisdiction on that? Could we ask Excel to do one way or the other?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bott, Excel has their standards that ultimately we can't override per se, but the condition of approval did include Excel would have to verify that that is a part of their standard as it relates to the connectivity for solar gardens.
Are they guided by the state, or, is there an authority over Excel asking them to enforce some requirements? So my question is, if city can't enforce it, is it state that will tell Excel, okay, you cannot have overground cabling here in this area or in that area?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bott, I don't have an answer for that. I would have to investigate that further.
Any further requests? Okay, and then we'll go back from 8.3 to 8.2. Do we have any responses to inquiries?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so you found in your packet a written response to the open forum, or actually is public hearing rather, from our April meeting. We did verbally respond at the meeting, but I just wanted you to be aware that we also did respond in writing to those questions and comments as a part of that public hearing.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moving on to item number 9, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.